I would say, Ripple is obviously, they have three validators, part of the UNL. They definitely hold some weight. They propose a lot of amendments. Timing from them, I would say, is a bit more curated to their objectives. But the actual voting on these, they can't sway one way or the other. They actually have to be voted on by the UNL validators, and you do have to get 25 other people to vote your direction. So it's not like this is a centralized thing. It is completely decentralized, but it can be curated as far as timing that benefits them. So all that being said, the reason you would allocate to a DAT is you're basically moving up the risk curve in your allocation to XRP. Okay, so you can have a direct allocation. You can have an allocation through an ETF. Both of those are pretty the kind of the low risk on the spectrum. The ETF is probably the lowest risk on the spectrum because it's in your stock portfolio. They hold it in institutional custody. It's backed 1-to-1 and audited, all the stuff. Holding it on your own is probably more risky than allocating through an ETF where somebody else manages the assets, unless you're holding it in institutional custody with Digital Wealth Partners, and then you're getting the same assurances you would for an ETF. But if you're holding it on a cold wallet or on an exchange, probably a little bit further up the risk curve, and then a DAT would be even further up the risk curve. So it would be like taking leverage on the XRP on a trade. So you're leveraged long or leveraged short on the XRP. That would kind of be the equivalent. And the reason for that is they can use debt as a tool to trade above NAV. So what does that mean? Well, they could borrow money to buy more XRP, and that's basically a leveraged play on the asset itself. And you can take an allocation in the company, and that would then give you some leverage as well. And it can trade above NAV and it can trade below NAV. And they can also put that XRP to work in more exotic or riskier ways versus just staking it, like you would be able to do for an ETF, if it's an Ethereum ETF or a Solana ETF. We don't have native staking for XRP, so really the only way to generate a return on it is to currently margin the asset in some way and then trade that in a market neutral strategy. We do that at Digital Wealth Partners. Midas does that. Doppler does that. Anybody else that's providing yield or returns on XRP at this point is margining the asset they're using as collateral. They get a line of credit against it. They trade that in a market neutral strategy, and that's how they're generating returns on it.